At L&M Fine Jewelry, we hand select our diamonds to give you the very best prices possible. Monty knows a great deal when he finds one. Find your great deal at L&M Fine Jewelry.
Your diamond destination.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Samuel Akem here, and I am back with another Tuesday video for all of you who love to watch my Tuesday videos. We're giving all our thoughts today. Sorry, I'm turning my low power mode off on my phone. But thank you guys for tapping in. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys hit the like button. Make sure you guys leave me a comment down below. Any thoughts you got from this video this week. We're going to be talking about the Montana versus Tennessee State game. We're also going to be talking about the Illinois State versus SEMO game. Illinois State will now take on UC Davis. We're going to be giving our thoughts about Lehigh versus Richmond. Lehigh will take on Idaho. We're going to talk about Abilene Christian versus Northern Arizona. Obviously, all of these teams being Big Sky teams or teams that will play against Big Sky competition. We're also going to be talking about UT Martin versus New Hampshire. I'm going to give my overall reactions from the first round of the FCS Playoffs. I'm going to talk about some of my top performances that I saw this week. Honestly, we might cut that one out. I didn't have enough time to talk about top performances. We might leave that for the next round after the second round. But then we're going to preview South Dakota State versus Montana, Montana State versus UT Martin. Going to talk about UC Davis versus Illinois State, South Dakota versus Tarleton State, NDSU versus ACU, and Idaho versus Lehigh. Appreciate you guys for tapping in. It was a great first round of the FCS playoffs. Some upsets, some teams that moved on to the second round, some games that probably weren't as close as people thought. But we're going to be talking about all of it. So make sure you guys stay tuned in for the entire video. Leave me a comment, subscribe, and we will get straight into it. Okay, first things first, I want to talk about that Montana versus Tennessee State game. It was a back and forth game throughout the second half. It was really one-sided in the first half. That Montana defense was playing a really high level of football, getting to the quarterback at a high level. That Tennessee State offensive line posed no threat to the pass rush of Montana, and they were able to get to the quarterback at will. I believe they had 5 or 6 sacks in the game, a ton of tackles for loss. They had a really big-time game. The Tennessee State offensive line really struggled, but later in the game, Tennessee State was able to hang around because Montana started to turn over the ball. Logan Fife had 2 fumbles in the game. Eli Gilman had a fumble in the red zone. This game really shouldn't have been close. It ended up being a 2-score game. Montana was favored by 16, if I'm not mistaken, before this game. Montana should have covered. They did not cover. Let me see if they have the line here. Yeah, so on ESPN Bet, Montana was favored by 18. They should have scored. They should have won the game by at least 2 to 3 scores. They ended up getting a lot of field goals, getting stopped in the red zone, coming away with points. They missed 1 field goal, but their kicker was 4 for 5 on field goals. So that's 12 points from field goals alone. He had a long 50-yard field goal, the longest of the season, the longest since 2021 when Kevin Macias made a few 50-yarders that season. But it was a pretty good game for Montana in terms of their special teams play and in terms of how they finished the game. But if you look at it from a standpoint of they are going to have to play South Dakota State next week, it wasn't a super good game. Offensively, they didn't play the best game. They really struggled. Logan Fife was 11 for 22, 50% completion percentage, 97 yards. Kale was 1 for 1. They ended up being 12 for 23 for 115 passing yards. In the run game, they ran 42 times for 254 yards. Eli Gilman had 20 carries, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Malai Fanati was the second leading rusher, 8 carries for 46 yards. Outside of the late run that Eli Gilman had, he was running the ball pretty successfully throughout the game, so I don't want to say that he had a terrible game or from any stretch, because he didn't have a terrible game. But from a total offensive perspective in this game, especially against a Tennessee State team that isn't super good when you compare it to the Big Sky Conference in Missouri Valley or even the CAA. I mean, maybe the CAA, but especially the Big Sky Conference in the Missouri Valley, they're not a super good team. You saw SEMO yesterday. They lost by 8. And they had 8 turnovers in the game. So probably a game they really should have won against Illinois State. Illinois State moves on. They win the game on the road, even though they're the higher seed. From the passing standpoint of things, their leading receiver had 35 receiving yards. They really didn't have a ton of success in the red zone offensively, and the fumbles really hurt them. They fumbled in the red zone inside the 5-yard line. That would have been guaranteed points. Logan Fife fumbled away 2 drives where they were probably around midfield. Fumbled had 2 turnovers from that standpoint. So, when you look at this game offensively and you look at the fact that Junior Bergen had 2 punt return touchdowns, they won by 2 scores. Eli Gilman had a long 59-yard run. You don't want to have to depend. I mean, obviously, there's 3 phases of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. And sometimes your special teams is going to have to pick up the slack where your offense or defense may be lacking. But when you look at playing a better team in South Dakota State, you don't want to have to depend on your special teams unit to save you. You don't want to have to look at your returner to have to save you. And teams are going to get smart, and we don't care where the ball goes out of bounds. Kicking it out of bounds is better than kicking it to Junior Bergen, and that's what this is going to turn into, especially against South Dakota State. We saw them play last year. I don't think Junior had any significant returns against South Dakota State in the punt return game or in the kickoff return game. I can't remember what they used to not. I can't remember what they did to keep the ball away from Junior Bergen, but I don't remember him having any huge returns in the national championship game. Tennessee State was not that smart. Eddie George talked about after the game, they tried to make an effort not to kick the ball to him. They were unsuccessful. You saw on the second kickoff return, it was near the sidelines, and Junior Bergen still went and got it and was still able to take it down the sidelines for a touchdown. Really good blocks from the return team. Got to give credit where credit is due. But you don't want to have to depend on your special teams unit. They needed a Herculean effort from Junior Bergen for them to be able to beat a Tennessee State team, a good Tennessee State team. They're the Big South OVC champions. They were 9-3 coming out of the regular season, so they won a majority of their games. They lost one to Tennessee Tech. They lost one to... Don't make me lie. I can't remember exactly who they lost their games to, but a good football team. And, they were favored by 18 for a reason. They should have covered, and they did not. So from that standpoint, it kind of concerns me going into the South Dakota State week because, where is your scoring going to come from? This is a really, really high-level defense in South Dakota State. They don't make a ton of mistakes. They don't miss tackles. They play high-level football all around. It's going to take a very clean game from this Montana team. You definitely can't turn over the ball. And this is coming from a team that has not turned over the ball at a significant rate this year. They've been pretty good about protecting the ball. And for them to have the fumbles that they did in the first round of the playoffs and turn over the ball, it's a little concerning. Not to say that it's concerning from the standpoint that it'll continue throughout the next game, but it's concerning that it's this late in the season. You're not playing as clean football as you should, and you're about to take a very formidable 3 seed in South Dakota State, who's the 2-time defending national champion. It's not that this Montana team isn't familiar with this team. Mark Gronowski, Adam Bach on the defensive end of things. They got some good players defensively. They really play as a unit. There's no really standout players on the defense. I'm sure they have a ton of all-conference picks, but in terms of names that you think of, you don't really think of any names on the defense, but you think of the unit as a whole. They tackle well. They fly to the ball. They're good in the run. They're good at defending the pass. They're just good all around. They don't give up a ton of points. They're one of the better defenses that we have seen in a long time. That is why they've won 2 national championships, as well as Mark Gronowski and all of the offensive weapons that they have. Montana definitely has to play a cleaner game. They have to find... Now, the question for a lot of Montana fans this week is going to be, who gets the start? Is it Montana? Is it going to be Logan Fife, or is it going to be Keali Ayat? I lean towards saying probably Keali Ayat. I don't think Logan Fife was in 100% good standing with the coaches before the Montana State game. He played a decent game in Montana State. I think there were some throws that he missed in that game that he could have had. And then you look at this game that he had against Tennessee State, 2 fumbles in a close game, in a game that ended up being close because of the turnovers. That probably shouldn't have been close. That doesn't bode well for you, especially now that Keali Ayat is healthy, especially considering that I think they really want to develop Keali Ayat. What better way to develop him than putting him in a big-time game against the 2-time defending national champions, South Dakota State? I suspect that he'll probably get the start this week. Now, I don't know. The Tennessee State game, those are some of the things that I gathered from it, was the struggles that they had offensively. They were able to run the ball successfully, but it seems like in the past game, Montana has really been struggling to be able to complete things downfield. They had an opportunity to hit LaKeldra Bridges down the field on a deep, looked like a post route because it seemed Keelan White coming across on the over, but Kel Bridges was wide open. He had to slow down to catch the pass, and it ended up being an incomplete pass. Another play, he had Kel Bridges open down the field. He got past the flat defender in the corner, and the safety was trying to come over. Had the ball been a little more outside, a little more in stride, Kel Bridges probably could have scored on that as well. So just some missed passes from Logan Fife. He hasn't been playing the highest grade of football the last few weeks, and, I don't know if that's because of the tiff he had with the coaches. I don't know if that's because of, I don't know what that's because of. But it seems like he's taken a little step backward from what we had seen throughout the middle part of the season, where he was playing a really high level of football, completing a high percentage of passes and throwing all over the place. And they're playing against better defenses. They're playing against better teams, so give them credit where credit is due for the teams that he's been playing against. But it hasn't been the same level of football. So that's a bit concerning. But from the Tennessee standpoint of things, from the whole macro of the game, Montana got the victory at home. Probably the final home game for some of these seniors in Washington Grizzly Stadium. Junior Bergen absolutely went out with a bang. Eli Gilman went out with a bang for his sophomore campaign. He got over 1,000 rushing yards in that game. For the season in that game, he got over 2,000 rushing yards in his career. He moved to 5th all-time in rushing touchdowns for Montana history. He passed me in total touchdowns. He probably had 30 because I had 29 in my career. So he passed me for total touchdowns in a career. It was a good game for Montana. But when you talk about it from a standpoint of they're going to take on a much, much better opponent than Tennessee State. I mean, we watched this Tennessee State team play North Dakota State. That's another one of their losses, North Dakota State. We watched this Tennessee State team play North Dakota State earlier in the season. They lost 52-3. And to say that Montana shouldn't have won this game by at least 2 scores, 21 points, is not a stretch. They lost to North Dakota State. They also lost to Tennessee Tech. And then they also lost a game throughout the middle of the season to UT Martin. UT Martin is the team that just beat up on New Hampshire yesterday in the first round of the playoffs. They will now take on Montana State. But, it's just a little concerning. They got the win, obviously, in the playoffs to survive and advance. Now they are on to South Dakota State. They're game planning for South Dakota State. We will see what they're able to put together for that team. But we're looking at Montana is looking at a tough opponent coming into this week. They moved to 9-4. You guys let me know what your thoughts were from that game. Are you guys kind of echoing the same things that I'm echoing? Great game from Junior Bergen. Explosive game. If you were in the stadium last night, it was awesome to see. But from a standpoint of looking at better competition, you got some things to work on. And at this point in the season, if you're not who you're going to be, I mean, the teams are who they are at this point in the season. You can say that they got to do better in this, they got to do better in this, but it really is what it is at this point. You're not putting in any new significant plays at this point in the season. You're not really changing anything that you do at this point in the season. So you really are who you are, and you got to roll the dice and go with the guys that you got out there. So we will see what Montana is able to do. Make sure you guys leave me a comment and let me know what you guys thought about that, and I will move on. Okay, next I want to talk about this Illinois State versus Southeast Missouri game. It ended up being a one-score game late in the game, but Illinois State gets the road victory despite being the seeded team, the higher seeded team. Well, SEMO wasn't seeded at all. Despite being the seeded team, Illinois State was able to get the victory. This game was wild. Paxton DeLaurent threw for 557 passing yards, 48 for 85. He threw the ball 85 times. They only ran the ball 15 times, and it might have been less because, they were down a lot during this game, so they had to throw the ball a ton. 557 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions. They fumbled the ball away 4 times. They lost 3 of them. That is 100% why they lost this game. SEMO should have won this game by a score or 2, but the turnovers, man. They could not hang on to the ball for anything. They were turning over the ball at a high rate, and they still lost by 8. I don't know. Man. I don't know what to say about this. Amazing game. Their leading rusher was Brandon Epton, 6 carries for 32 yards. They had 3 100-yard receivers. Cam Pedro had 11 receptions, 149 yards. Tristan Smith had 10 receptions, 139 yards. And Donnie Cheers had 12 receptions, 119 yards. On the Illinois State side of things, Daniel Subkowitz had 7 receptions, 136 yards, and a touchdown. They didn't run the ball successfully for Illinois State. They only had 51 rushing yards. Their leading rusher had 12 carries, 17 yards. Their quarterback was 24, Tommy Rittenhouse, 24-36, 277 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, they had a pretty decent game. But I really think this is more about SEMO than it is about Illinois State. Give credit to Illinois State for being able to take the ball away 8 times. That's going to greatly buffer their turnover margin. They only turned over the ball once. Their quarterback had a fumble. He lost it. But it says here that they had 3 fumble recoveries. Yeah, okay. They lost only 1 fumble, so an 8-1 fumble turnover margin, 8-1 turnover margin for Illinois State. That is the number one way to lose the game. I mean, when you look at SEMO losing this game by 8 points, a one-possession game. You really look back at this and going to think, I was watching much of this game. It seemed like everywhere you looked, every time you looked up, there was a turnover happening. Every time you looked up, Illinois State or SEMO was giving the ball back to Illinois State. Illinois State was doing a great job punching the ball out. They were doing a great job attacking the ball. The game was played in Missouri. So it's kind of strange that SEMO playing in front of their home crowd would play you say as bad, and they didn't play necessarily bad. Their quarterback threw for 550 yards. I mean, that's not a bad game at all. But then you look at the 5 interceptions. You're like, okay, 550 yards. Yes. 5 interceptions. No. And then the run game. 35 rushing yards on the game. I mean, that is terrible. That is absolutely terrible. You can't win any game that way. You're never going to win a game that way from rushing for 30 yards. But Illinois State rushed for 51 yards and they won the game. So, I think this game was more about Southeast Missouri than it was about Illinois State. Would love to see what Illinois State is going to be able to do in the next round against UC Davis. But from this standpoint, the turnovers are the story of the game for me. I don't think there really needs to be any more discussion about this game except for the fact that Illinois State capitalize on the turnovers. And SEMO, even looking at this being a one-score game, it might be an indictment against Illinois State's offense, the fact that they only won by 1 score and they got 8 turnovers. 8 turnovers in the game. You got to get more points off of these turnovers. Obviously, ESPN doesn't tell you how many points off turnovers they got. Illinois State was only favored by 3, so they did cover. But, just a devastating turn of events for SEMO, a team that was, one of the better teams in the in the country throughout the season. I think when they dropped their top 10 seeds, SEMO might have been one of those top 10 seeds. They didn't finish the season off too hot. They lost a game to Lindenwood late in the season. They also lost a game late in the season, or the last game of the season, to Tennessee State, to share the Big South OVC title with them. SEMO still ended up getting the auto bid out of that conference, but UT Martin looks like the better team in that conference so far. They're the only team that moves on to the second round. But credit to the Big South OVC for being a three bid league this year. They play good football in that league, but there are definitely levels in the FCS, and the Big Sky and the Missouri Valley have shown that they are the level. Specifically, the Missouri Valley has shown that they are the level when it comes to high-level football play in the FCS. That's really all that needs to be said. 8-point game for SEMO. They lose. They finished their season 9-4. Illinois State finishes their season 10 they move on. They move the record to 10-3. They will take on UC Davis. I will give my thoughts about that UC Davis here coming up. But you guys let me know in the comments what you thought about that SEMO game. I don't think there's any more discussion outside of the turnovers. I did watch this game, and it was a struggle for them, man. It was a struggle for for SEMO. It really looked like a slow developing game from both sides of things. Obviously, later on in the game, Paxton DeLaurent really threw it all over the place. But you guys let me know in the comments, and I will move on.
Treasure State University of Montana football is a way of life. Lithia Ford has long been a proud sponsor of Grizz football, and Lithia Ford of Missoula is thrilled to have several of the best Montana football seniors driving the best trucks in Montana. Aspen Sound is the premier car audio and accessory shop in Montana. Aspen Sound makes sure the boys are riding in style with tinted windows and state-of-the-art stereo systems. There's always a party in Montana. Whether you're going to a concert, a wedding, or a football game, the Montana Party Bus will get you there. Skyline Sports and ESPN MT cover the Big Sky with more depth than anyone. Check out SkylineSportsMT.com and tune in to Nuanez Now on 102.9 ESPN Missoula every day. My Montana Roots and Wear Your Roots clothing is your go-to spot for the most unique and comfortable lifestyle clothing you'll find anywhere. And get your custom t-shirts to support your favorite player. From 5 local businesses who love Montana, best of luck to the Grizz as they pursue another Big Sky Conference championship.
Now I want to talk about this Lehigh versus Richmond matchup. Lehigh, they were not seeded. They played against, I believe, the 9th seeded Richmond Spider. Is it Spiders? What is their mascot? Somebody tell me in the comments what their mascot is. But Richmond, they lost the game. Lehigh won the game 20-16 to move to 9-3 on the season. Richmond finishes their season 10-3. Lehigh, obviously coming out of that Patriot League, I believe they won that. Because the Patriot League was one big league. Lehigh won that Patriot League. Their quarterback Hayden Johnson was 14 for 18, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. In the running game, they run for 136 yards. Jaden Green, their leading rusher, 11 carries, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Their leading receiver, Geoffrey Jamil, 10 receptions, 137 yards, and a touchdown. Richmond, although they did win the CAA conference, I believe they won the CAA outright. They are unable to come away. Yeah, they were 8-0 in conference play this year, 10-3 overall. They were unable to come away with the victory, which is just a tough turn of events for Richmond. The CAA is not a very strong conference. Unfortunately, New Hampshire lost yesterday. Richmond lost yesterday. Rhode Island moved on. They played against an NEC Central Connecticut, and it was a close game from that standpoint as well. And then Villanova moves on as well. They played. We'll get into that a little bit later. But, Lehigh gets the upset victory against Richmond. They will now take on Idaho in the Kibbe Dome. That should be a pretty good game. I would probably favor probably favor Idaho in that game. Richmond was favored by 10.5 points in this game, and they lose. Their quarterback had 1 touchdown. He was 24. Camden Coleman was 24 for 37, 199 yards, and a touchdown. Their leading rusher, Zach Palmer-Smith, they ran for 146 yards total. Their leading rusher had 22 carries, 107 yards. And then their leading receiver, Landon Ellis, had 12 receptions for 76 yards. Richmond had 1 fumble in the game, so 1 turnover in the game. They had 2 fumbles. They only lost 1 of them. Lehigh recovered a fumble, but that turnover. So it really seems like the turnover margin was 1-1 in this game, an even turnover margin. And when it's like that, this game was played at home for Richmond. I know a lot of these teams don't have super big home crowds, but when you look at this game and you look at how it turned out, Lehigh gets the upset victory. You obviously suspect there's going to be some upsets in a 2014 playoff bracket in the first round, and Lehigh was one of those teams to get an upset victory. Penalty yardage 3 for 25 for both teams in penalties. Rushing 136 for Lehigh, 146 for Richmond. Passing 200 passing yards for Lehigh, 199 for Richmond. Total yards 336 for Lehigh, 345 for Richmond. 8 for 16 on third down for Richmond. 7 for 11 on third down for Lehigh. So a little better percentage. Fourth down 0 for 1 for Lehigh, 1 for 3 for Richmond. Statistically, these teams were pretty evenly matched. It says Lehigh threw 2 interceptions in this game. They must have had a backup quarterback. Yeah, they had a backup quarterback who threw an interception. Matt Machalik threw an interception in this game. But really, statistically, time of possession, these teams are pretty even. This game was pretty evenly matched from both teams. Lehigh had 2 turnovers to Richmond's 1 turnover. So from that standpoint, they won the turnover battle. But Richmond just wasn't able to get anything going. I haven't watched a ton of Richmond this year, so I don't know what they do well. But it just seems like they laid an egg yesterday against Lehigh at home. You really expect to win those games, but they finished their season 10-3. They are the outright CAA champions, so they do get rings this year, but unfortunately, it's a quick playoff exit for them. You guys let me know in the comments what you guys think about Lehigh and Richmond. What did you guys think about the games that they played? What did you guys think about the comp that they played? What did you guys think about them having an early exit maybe? Maybe at least a second-round exit for them, but they get a first-round exit, being the 9th seeded team out of the CAA. A lot of people on Twitter also were talking about last night how the CAA is not as strong as a conference as some people may think. James Madison used to be in that conference. They also had, who else was in that conference? Delaware is obviously in that conference. They're not playoff eligible this year. There's another team that I'm forgetting about. Maybe not. Either way, the CAA has been seen as maybe one of the stronger teams in the FCS throughout the years, and this year it doesn't so much look like a super strong conference. Obviously, we still have more CAA teams to play in the second round of playoffs, but you guys let me know in the comments what you think about that, and I will move on. Okay, next we are going to talk about Abilene Christian versus Northern Arizona. Abilene Christian gets the 24-0 victory against Northern Arizona. Abilene Christian was playing a backup quarterback yesterday. Not so sure what happened to their starting quarterback. Maybe he's hurt. Maybe he's dealing with an ankle injury. But McIver, who is their starting quarterback, Maverick McIver, he's thrown for 3,600 yards this year. He did not play yesterday. Carson Haggard played instead of him yesterday. He was 23 for 29, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I mean, when you look at a team that throws 3 interceptions, Alex McLaughlin gets one of those interceptions. All-conference player, probably going to be an All-American safety this year. He got his 3rd interception of the season this year. 3 interceptions. You really think a team in a game should be closer, but the Northern Arizona offense, which was their biggest problem all season, just is not able to get anything going. There were some missed deep passes from their quarterback, Ty Pennington. He was 16 for 31, 165 yards and an interception, near 50% completion percentage. It really comes down to the rushing game for them, though. 24 carries, 29 yards total on the day. That is really the biggest thing for them as to why they didn't win this. I mean, offensively in totality, they didn't play a good offensive game. Let's look at their offensive stats here. They had 194 total yards on offense, opposed to ACU's 475 yards of total offense, 165 passing, 29 rushing, 5 penalties for 35 yards. ACU had 8 penalties for 75 yards. The time of possession isn't super overweighted in ACU's favor, 33 minutes for ACU and 26 minutes for NAU. So really from that standpoint, this is another game that I was paying attention to and watching, and it really just seemed like NAU's offense couldn't get anything going. They couldn't find any success anywhere. They were struggling from all facets of the game. They were getting turnovers and not able to get any points out of it. When you get shut out in a playoff game, that doesn't look very hot for the Big Sky Conference or for NAU standpoint. But first-year head coach, they get to the playoffs. Pretty good season for NAU and a first-year head coach when they weren't very great last year. They haven't been very great in the last few years. Well, actually, they were pretty good last year. But this year, new head coach. They get to the playoffs. They finish the season 8-5. ACU will move on to the next round of the playoffs, and they will play North Dakota State, if I'm not mistaken, in their next game in the second round of the playoffs in Fargo, North Dakota. I know North Dakota State's trying to bounce back from a loss they took against South Dakota in the final week of the regular season. But ACU gets the 24-0 victory. Really, offensively for NAU is what lost in this game, not finding any success offensively, because when you hold a team to 24 points, I mean, the NAU defense, they have a good defense. I mean, they got good players. They get to the quarterback. They take away the ball. They're able to rush the passer. They're pretty decent against the run game. Not yesterday. Sam Hicks was running all over the place. Sam Hicks for ACU had 22 carries, 171 yards, and a touchdown. Dude was just absolutely a beast in this game. He averaged 7.8 yards a carry yesterday. Blaine Taylor, their receiver, number 13, had 5 receptions, 89 yards, and a touchdown. They really played a clean, full game. The UAC Conference is looking really, really good. The UAC Conference, Tarleton got a victory yesterday. ACU got a victory yesterday, and they had another team. I swear the UAC had 3 teams in the playoffs. Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky lost to Villanova. But Abilene Christian gets their victory. They move on to the next round of the playoffs. NAU is going to finish their season at 8-5. Tough way to finish the season for ACU or for NAU. A team that had played good ball, barely got into the playoffs. I believe they were the last team into the playoffs. They got that last spot that they released when they were releasing the bracket. But, good season for NAU. ACU, good luck against North Dakota State in the Fargo Dome. We will see what they're able to do. You guys let me know what you guys thought about this ACU versus NAU game in the comments, and I will move on. Okay, the last game I wanted to preview today was the UT Martin versus New Hampshire game. UT Martin absolutely blitzed New Hampshire, coming out of the CAA conference at 8-4. UT Martin coming out of the Big South OVC merged conference. They had a pretty good game. Kinkead Dent, their quarterback, was 17 for 26, 246 yards, no touchdowns. They had 5 rushing touchdowns. Patrick Smith, their leading rusher, 15 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown. Their leading receiver was Trevante Rucker, 9 receptions, 88 yards, no passing touchdowns for them yesterday, but they ran the ball all over the place. They ran for 236 yards on 52 rushes. From the New Hampshire standpoint of things, their quarterback did not play a great game. Well under 50% completion percentage. He completed, they don't even have the completion percentage on here, but he was 14 for 35, 71 yards, and an interception. In the run game, they only ran for 53 yards, 5 carries, 36 yards. Their leading rusher, Caleb Mead. And then in the passing game, their leading receiver had 23 receiving yards, 3 receptions, 23 yards. Just a tough game from that standpoint. When you look at who UT Martin is going to play in Montana State, now obviously New Hampshire is not Montana State. I'm not making a comparison to them at all. But them being able to hold New Hampshire to 53 rushing yards, we will see if they are able to do that against Montana State. Montana State averages around 300 rushing yards a game, maybe right under 300 rushing yards a game, like 280, 290, something around there. They are a magnificent rushing team, and they do a lot of good in the run game, and they are a horse when it comes to running the ball. They are the number 1 seed for a reason. 12-0 on the season. We will see what they were able to do in the playoffs, but my goodness, UT Martin. Just blitzing New Hampshire. New Hampshire completely unable to do anything with UT Martin. I did not watch this game, but UT Martin gets the victory. They are the only team from the Big South OVC to move on. SEMO lost yesterday, as well as Tennessee State, both to Illinois State and Montana. But UT Martin is holding that Big South OVC flag high and true in the second round of the playoffs. I think UT Martin also made the playoffs last year, and they lost in the first round, if I'm not mistaken, to Lafayette or Delaware. No. They might have played Furman. It might have been Furman in the playoffs. They might have lost to Furman in the playoffs. Somebody in the comments can let me know about that. But UT Martin is moving on to the second round. They will take on Montana State, the number 1 seed in Montana State. That is because I believe New Hampshire was that 16 seed. So the 16 seed, whoever they beat or whether they win or the team they play beats them, they will go on to play the 1 seed. So UT Martin gets a tough task in Bozeman, Montana, to play against the Montana State Bobcats. And that should be a good game. But UT Martin or New Hampshire is going to finish their season 8-5, coming out of that CAA conference. Once again, furthering some of those sentiments online of people speaking on the CAA, saying it is a weaker conference, saying that they don't play high-level football, saying that they didn't deserve as many bids as they got. I mean, you can't really argue with them given some of the performances that some of their teams had. Their outright conference champion lost to a Patriot League champion and Lehigh, and that is not a good look for your conference at all. So I know that's a very interesting turn of events for the FCS, a very interesting turn of events for New Hampshire. But UT Martin will move on. They will face Montana State, and we will see what they're able to do in the second round of the playoffs. If you guys watch this UT Martin game, let me know in the comments what you guys thought about it. What did UT Martin that really set them apart? It really seems like they spread the wealth around in the run game and really found a lot of success in the run game. The passing game, they were really even, 236 in the air and on the ground, 246 through the air. And then it seriously seems like the defense for UT Martin really was a difference maker. New Hampshire didn't get anything going offensively, and you can't win any game that way, especially when your quarterback is completing under 50% of his passes. 14 for 35 is absolutely criminal, and I want to see that's 40% completion percentage. You can't win any game in college football that way unless you just have an amazing rushing team. But they didn't have either yesterday. So you guys let me know in the comments what you thought about that, and I will move on. Okay, now I want to give my overall reactions about the first round of the FCS playoffs, what teams I think really showed out, what teams I think underperformed, and give my overall thoughts about the first round of the FCS playoffs. So first, hold up, let me turn off low battery mode on my iPad here, which is where I get a lot of my information from when I'm doing these videos. The screen goes dark before I'm ready for it to go dark. And, okay, so one team that I think really, I think it was very telling. I talk about a lot of times, and I mentioned in my last week's video, I thought the Rhode Island versus Connecticut game would be a 2 to 3 score game in Rhode Island's favor. I'm pretty sure they were probably favored by 1 to 2 scores. I'm looking at it right now. Rhode Island was they still have the lines up here. They were a 15-point favorite, 15.5-point favorite, so 2-score favorite against Central Connecticut. And they only won by 4 points. I did not watch this game. Actually, I did. I watched a little bit of this game, and Central Connecticut actually started the game pretty hot, but Rhode Island ended up getting the victory. They ran for 227 yards. But I think this is telling about this Rhode Island team and the CAA in a whole this year. I think the CAA was down competition-wise. They had a really good Albany team in their conference last year, a really good Villanova team in their conference last year. Villanova was a decent team this year. Rhode Island was a team that was undefeated for a lot of the season, or at least undefeated against the FCS for a lot of the season. But as soon as they played some tougher competition in Delaware, they dropped a game. And that was really the only tough team they played this year in their regular season schedule. And I believe they finished the season they're 11-2 right now. They finished the regular season 10-2. Those 2 losses coming against Delaware, and then they lost against Minnesota. So they only lost against one FCS opponent, and they still have only lost against one FCS opponent this year. But winning against an NEC team that was 7-5 on the regular season, they finished their season 7-6, and you only beat them by 4, and you're an 11-2 team favored by 2 scores. I mean, I don't want to say Rhode Island underperformed, but I really think that's telling about the CAA and really telling about Rhode Island. I think it echoes some of the sentiments that people had about this Rhode Island team, saying that they're not the strongest team in the FCS, saying that their schedule was a little weaker. Sam Herder talked about this online. The CAA did not have a seeded team this year, a top 8 seeded team this year. So none of the CAA teams got a first round bye. Even Richmond, who was undefeated in conference play, did not get a first round bye. They were the 9th seeded team, and they lost yesterday. So, the CAA really underperformed yesterday. New Hampshire lost, Richmond lost, and then you look at Rhode Island. They played a close game against an NEC conference that is not strong. The NEC conference only gets one team in the playoffs every year, and they usually get boat raced by whoever they play against. That was not the case yesterday. Villanova won against an Eastern Kentucky team out of the United Athletic Conference, barely by 5. So when you look at the total makeup of the 4 teams out of the CAA that got into the playoffs, 2 losses and 2 close victories. The teams won by a total of 9 points in the first round of the playoffs. That is not a good look for the Coastal Athletic Conference, Coastal Atlantic. I think it's Coastal Atlantic, Coastal Athletic, Coastal Atlantic Association. I think it's Coastal Atlantic Association. But not a good look. Not a good look for the CAA. That is a conference that I think underperformed. A conference that I think probably overperformed yesterday was the UAC. The UAC had 3 teams in the playoffs make it to the playoffs this year, and 2 of those 3 teams got victories yesterday. Tarleton State got a big-time victory against Drake. Credit to Drake, because this is a Drake team. I mean, what do you think about Tarleton State opposed to what do you think about Drake? That's another discussion for another day. Maybe the UAC and Pioneer aren't as far apart as people may think, but I think the UAC had a good year. I've been on the UAC's head previous to this season saying that I didn't think they were a strong conference, and they played good ball this year. 3 teams into the playoffs, that speaks enough for itself, and 2 of the 3 teams got first round victories. That says enough about the UAC. But Tarleton got a 43-29 victory against Drake. Eastern Kentucky lost a close one against Villanova, a team that made it to the quarterfinals last year against South Dakota State, and lost a close one. And then you had ACU get a victory against a Big Sky opponent, NAU, and shut them out. So a really good showing from the United Athletic Conference. I think that conference showed out. I think they had a good showing in the first round of the playoffs. It was good ball being played from the UAC conference. You look at Tarleton State, they got that really good running back in Kayvon Britton. He had 29 carries, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. Their quarterback threw for 26 to 36, 337 yards, 2 touchdowns. They had a receiver, Darius Cooper, number 6, go for 11 catches, 190 yards. He has 1,200 receiving yards on the season, and 1 touchdown in that game. Just an amazing game from Darius Cooper, their receiver at Tarleton State. Tarleton State has been a team that has been on the up and up every year. They get their first 10-win season in FCS ball, 10-3 on the season. They will face off against South Dakota next week. Now, I think that's a game that South Dakota should win pretty handedly, but who knows? The UAC conference has been formidable this year. ACU is a formidable opponent. They will play in Fargo, and then Tarleton State will play against South Dakota. So going up to play in the Missouri Valley and the Dakotas, that is going to be a tough task for anybody in that UAC conference. That's going to be a tough task for anybody in the country, but specifically those teams that are going up there to play in the Dakotas. But that is a conference that I think showed out yesterday. Some really big performances. Eastern Kentucky got a close L against Villanova. Villanova will move on and face off against Incarnate Word in San Antonio next week. So that should be a pretty good game as well. That's probably one of the top games upcoming in the conference. But, their quarterback threw 9 for 27, so not a great completion percentage, under 50% completion percentage. Their running back, Joshua Carter, ran it 21 times for 150 yards and a touchdown, but in the passing game, they couldn't get anything going, so that's really going to hurt you. But Villanova didn't show out either, so, Eastern Kentucky, credit to them. They finished their 2024 campaign off 8-5. On the season, so not a bad finishing record for them. But the UAC conference is on the up and up. I think they got some good teams in that conference. They're playing some good ball in that conference. I suspect that they'll keep growing and getting better as the years go on, unless conference realignment shakes some things up and we see some teams exit from the FCS. I know Tarleton has been whispered in some of those conference talks and some of those transition talks. So we will see how that goes. But those are some of my thoughts. You know, the first round was a good round. Southeast Missouri and Illinois State was a really good game. Montana and Tennessee State ended up being a pretty good game later on in that game. Richmond and Lehigh played a pretty close game. That was an upset victory for Lehigh. The Patriot League champions, they get the victory against the CAA champions. So some pretty telling results in that first round. UT Martin, another big telling result. They held New Hampshire to 50 rushing yards, which is pretty good for them when you look at that they're about to go play against a Montana State team, the best rushing team in the country. So we'll see if they're able to hold them anywhere near 50. I don't suspect Montana's probably going to rush for 250 to 300 yards against UT Martin, but maybe they can have a shocking result. We will see. But it's going to be an exciting second round of the playoffs. The first round was a good round. Probably the most shocking total for me in the first round was Abilene Christian versus Northern Arizona. They get shut out in Abilene, Texas, against an ACU team that is good. Once again, coming into that United Athletic Conference. So props to that UAC. But you guys let me know what you guys thought about the first round down in the comments, and I will move on.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about this Montana versus South Dakota State game that is taking place in Brookings, South Dakota. An FCS Frisco Championship, an FCS Championship Frisco rematch between Montana and South Dakota State. Two different teams this year. 9-4 Montana will go into 10-2 South Dakota State. South Dakota State was undefeated when they played last year, and Montana was 13-1 when they played last year. So a little bit different makeup. South Dakota State is not head and shoulders the best team in the Big Sky in the FCS this year, and Montana is not the same team that they were last year. Still really good defense from South Dakota State. Still really good quarterback from South Dakota State, Mark Gronowski, but not the same. Amir Johnson, 910 rushing yards on the season this year. I think Isaiah. Why do I always blank on his name? I'm blanking on his name right now, but the running back from last year for South Dakota State, Isaiah. Gosh, it's gonna drive me crazy. Oh, the running back for the Jets running back who was on South Dakota State last year. I think he had more close to 1,100, 1,200 yards at this point in the season last year, maybe a little less, but I think he ended his season with like 1,400 or 1,500 rushing yards last year, so a really good season from him. Mark Gronowski is still playing high-level football, and then Wildy, their leading receiver, 907 receiving yards on 8 touchdowns. Eli Gilman has 1,092 rushing yards on the season this year with 15 rushing touchdowns. Logan Fife is the leading passer, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on 1,800 passing yards. And then Keelan White, the leading receiver for the Grizz, 560 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns on 52 receptions. I really think that this game has to be a clean game for Montana if they want to win. South Dakota State is going to play really, really good defense. Montana has to have some opportune things happen to them as well. They got to throw the ball well. They got to run the ball well, which is a really hard task to ask against this South Dakota State team. But if you want to find some success, they have to run the ball successfully. They have to run the ball well, and it has to be a difference maker for them. They have to be able to find some success in the run game, whether that comes from the quarterback position or that comes from the running back position. I think one thing that hurt Montana in the national championship game against South Dakota State last year was their quarterback getting hurt early on in the game. He was not the same quarterback. He wasn't able to scramble. He wasn't scrambling on a ton of plays. You go back to that game, you look back at it, there's a ton of things that you look at to where had Clifton McDowell been able to run the ball, maybe it could be a little bit differently. I don't know if they start Logan Fife or Kali Ayat this week. I lean towards saying they start Kali Ayat, and if you start Kali Ayat in this game, you have to make an effort to get him on the ground and run the ball. Give him the ball, put the ball in his hands, let him be a difference maker. Let him be something that the South Dakota State defense has to game plan against or has to adjust against in that game and allow him to use his legs. The receivers have to show up. The quarterback, whoever starts the game, has to show up and make some big-time throws. You're not going to win this game unless your quarterback can make big-time throws and unless your quarterback can run the ball. Defensively, they have to stop the run. South Dakota State is going to run the ball. You have to be able to stop the run. You got to be able to stop the running game with Mark Gronowski. They're going to run him, and they're also going to run Amar Johnson, I think it's Amar Johnson, and their other running back. I can't remember what their other running back's name is, but they run the ball successfully. They're going to run the ball with him. If you look at any team that has had success against South Dakota State, it's been in being able to stop them in the run game. North Dakota State beat this team. They were able to stop them in the run game. South Dakota did not beat them, but South Dakota was pretty successful in stopping them in the run game. South Dakota should have beat South Dakota State. But that's another discussion for another day. You got to be able to stop them in the run game, and you got to be able to find success in the passing game, or you got to be able to, force Mark Gronowski to beat you with his arm. Not that he can't do it, but force Mark Gronowski to put the ball in the air 30 to 40 times in this game and allow that to be what beats you. Don't let them beat you on the ground. Don't let them beat you up, batter you around. Don't let them run the ball all over the place. You got to have success in the run game. I can't stress it enough. For Montana, they have to be able to hit some big plays in the passing game, and they have to have at least 150 to 200 rushing yards in this game. There has to be a level of consistency with the run game and the pass game, because you can't just pass the game 50 to 60 times against this South Dakota State team. They play back. They play a lot of quarters coverage. They're going to keep everything in front of you. They're going to stop the run very successfully, and they're going to force you to beat them in the air. Have some success in the run game, and don't put the ball all on the arm of your quarterback. And I think that could be a difference maker for Montana. Obviously, the lines haven't released, but I suspect Montana will probably be a 16 to 20 point dog in this game, 2 to 3 score dog in this game. It's being played in Brookings, South Dakota at home. South Dakota State is the two-time defending national champions. They have played a high level of defense. They had a really, really good defense last year. They have returned nearly a lot of pieces from that defense to this year, and they are playing almost as good ball as they were last year. Not exactly as good as they were last year, but damn close. And it's going to be a very tall task for Montana to come in there and get a victory, but it's not impossible. You just got to play clean ball, and you got to make opportunities, and you're going to have a trick play here or there. You're going to have to, get them somewhere. You're going to have to come up with a big play somewhere, a few big plays somewhere. Where do those big plays come from? Your receivers have to show up. You got to put the ball in their hands. You got to give them an opportunity to make plays over the top, and, we will see if they're able to do that. But what do you guys think about this South Dakota State-Montana game? I know a lot of people probably don't think highly of Montana, and they probably think it's going to be a blowout, and, that's definitely on the table. We will see. It's probably going to be really cold in Brookings, South Dakota. I think we saw the forecast was like a high of 27 degrees and probably a tremendous amount of wind. So we will see. That's Midwest ball being played in South Dakota. So we will see what Montana is able to do. You guys let me know in the comments what you think about that, and I will move on. Okay, next we are looking at Montana State versus UT Martin. UT Martin just got a big-time victory against gosh, why is my brain already doing this? It was a long night last night. The game didn't start till 8:15. They got a big victory against New Hampshire, and they held them to 53 rushing yards, which is, I think, the biggest thing that you want to look at when you look at this UT Martin game against Montana State. The biggest thing that Montana State does is they run the ball successfully. They're going to be playing at home in front of maybe not a packed crowd. It's a second-round game. I'm sure that, but they're the number one seed. Their fans should show up. It should be a loud environment. They put about 20,000 in their stands every week, and they play good ball. Tommy Mellott, their quarterback, only one interception on the year. Scottrey Humphrey, their leading rusher. How healthy is he? You also saw Julius Davis go down in the Montana the Grizz Cat game. How healthy is he? Rohan Jones went down. How healthy is he? Brody Grebe went down, but he came back in. How healthy is he? Those are some question marks I have about this Montana State team, but I don't have a ton of question marks about their offensive line. That is the unit that you need to look at when you look at this Montana State team. They make everything go, and as long as they have a running back that can do it, that's Adam Jones. And they have the offensive line, particularly behind Marcus Weir, Cole Sane, and their left tackle Moore. Those three guys together, they make the unit of that offensive line go. And I think as long as they have them, they should be able to do what they do in the run game. UT Martin, they have to force Tommy Mellott to throw the ball. They have to force Tommy Mellott to throw the ball. Montana State has to rush for 250, 300 yards. Not that Tommy Mellott can't make the throws. I'm not saying that Tommy Mellott can't make the throws, because in the Montana game against Montana, he made a throw to Rohan Jones on a seam route. That was a beautiful pass. He had a beautiful back shoulder pass to Taco Dalla where he was blanketed in coverage, and Tommy Mellott threw a perfect ball on the back shoulder. But in the past, there has been instances where The run game wasn't so much successful for Montana State, and Tommy Mellott was forced to throw it more than he usually does, and that ended up being the difference in them winning or losing a game. Not that Tommy Mellott can't do it. We've seen him do it, but can he do it consistently over and over and over? That is where you can get Montana State into a tiff. That is where you can catch them slipping. They have some really good receivers this year in Ty McCullough, Taco Dowler, Rohan Jones. How healthy is Rohan Jones? But really good players on that team, and some really good things that they do some really good things, and I'm interested to see what they are able to do in the FCS playoffs. I'm interested to see what UT Martin can do against them. They held New Hampshire to 50 rushing yards. That is the key for me. They obviously have to play good. This Montana State defense is really good, but I think it more so is on the UT Martin defense. Now, you don't want to look past the offense and say, oh, say they do stop the Montana State offense and they are able to hold them for 150, 200 rushing yards, but then offensively they're not able to score. That can't be the issue for them. Their quarterback has thrown for 2,300 passing yards this year, 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. You also have to take care of the ball. This is a Montana State team that's not going to turn over the ball. They're going to take care of the ball at a high level, and you can't give away possessions if you want to beat this team. You got to play the cleanest game you've played all season if you want to upset the number 1 seed in the FCS playoffs. I don't know how much confidence they're going to have coming in doing it. They're coming from Tennessee in the South, another team coming from Tennessee, just like Tennessee State just came up to Montana. It's going to be cold. It's going to be a little windy. It's going to be loud. How do they adjust to the weather? How do they adjust to the environment? It's going to be a hostile environment for a team to come in here and try to get a victory. They're probably going to be 4-score dogs in this game, but who knows? UT Martin got an upset against New Hampshire. Who's to say they can't get another upset against Montana State? I don't foresee that happening. I think Montana State really handles business in this game. I really think they get an easy victory against UT Martin. They had a week off to get healthy. Scottre Humphrey hopefully is more healthy in this game. I know he was beat up in that Montana game with that ankle injury that he suffered in the UC Davis game. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully Rohan Jones is healthy. Hopefully Brody Grebe was able to get more healthy as well. And hopefully they're able to roll past UT Martin to get an easy second-round playoff victory. But you guys let me know what you guys think about this game in the comments down below, and I will move on. Next, we are looking at the UC Davis versus Illinois State game. Illinois State got the road victory, even though they were the higher-seeded team, at Southeast Missouri on the back of 8 turnovers by Southeast Missouri. You can't expect UC Davis to turn over the ball 8 times. And you definitely can't expect Land Larison to have a bad game. You got to stop Land Larison. Or not stop Land Larison. You got to stop Miles Hastings. Force UC Davis to beat you on the ground. Miles Hastings can throw the ball all over the place. That's really the difference maker for them. He's thrown for 3,700 passing yards this year, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. If Illinois State wants to come away with a victory, you have to force them to beat you on the ground. I know how good Land Larison is. They run a gap scheme. They run a lot of power on this UC Davis offense behind that offensive line with Land Larison. You have to force them to beat you on the ground. Although Land Larison runs the ball successfully, they aren't a very successful rushing team. They're averaging around 130 to 140 rushing yards on the season. That's near the bottom of the FCS. Not even the bottom. That's near the middle of the pack of the FCS, around 60 to 70. The 60 to 70th best team in the FCS in rushing offense. Force them to beat you on the ground. Force Miles Hastings to put the ball in the belly of Land Larison. I don't know how you force a team to throw the ball, or I don't know how you stop a team from throwing the ball, but UC Davis does a lot of tricky stuff in their passing offense. They get the tight end leaks out. They do a lot of that throwback screen stuff, a lot of receiver passes, a lot of jet sweep. They do a lot of interesting stuff with this offense. It's a very interesting offense, but I think if you take away the passing offense of this UC Davis team, that is the way to beat them. Now, UC Davis, I think, is going to be favored in this game. I think, Illinois State needed 8 turnovers to beat SEMO by 8 points. That is telling enough in itself. This Illinois State offense is good. It's not great. They finished the regular season 9-3. They're 10-3 right now coming into this UC Davis game. I think UC Davis should be able to handle Illinois State they should be able to handle Illinois State. Illinois State put up 35 points, but they got 8 turnovers. If you at least get a point on 8 turnovers, that should be 24 points alone from getting at least a field goal off turnovers. they didn't turn all of the turnovers into points. That's why they only beat SEMO by 8 points by a score. And I think UC Davis should look at that and say, as long as we take care of the ball, as long as we do what we're able to do, we should win this game pretty handedly. I don't know how well Illinois State's offense will do against the UC Davis's defense. That is where Illinois State has a chance. The UC Davis defense is not the strongest unit in the country, and they have shown the ability to give up points. They gave up 39 against Sac State, one of the bottom tier teams in the Big Sky this year. They gave up a ton of points to they gave up 30 to Montana. They gave them some points earlier on in the season to Southern Utah. They've given up points throughout the season. And not that they're a bad unit, but they're not the best unit. They have some really good players, some all-conference players on their defense. But that's a unit that I think can be had, and I'll be very interested to see what they're able to do against Illinois State coming into this second round matchup. I think UC Davis should win this game handedly, but if there's a game that I'm kind of watching in this second round, I think it could be Illinois State versus UC Davis, and I'm very interested to see what they're able to do. You guys let me know what you guys think about this matchup in the comments down below, and I will move on. Okay, the final game I want to preview. I was going to talk about NDSU and ACU, and I was also going to talk about South Dakota versus Tarleton State. I don't really want to cover those games right now. We can talk about them after they play next week, so tap into my Tuesday video next week when I give my reactions to those games. I hopefully I get some highlights online. I can break down those games as well. But I want to talk about Lehigh versus Idaho. Lehigh, the Patriot League champion, they got an upset against Richmond. Idaho. There's never a game where it could potentially be close. I don't know how good the Patriot League is. They were very lackluster conference this year. Lehigh was really shows above, but all the other records in that conference this year were not super strong. You have Lehigh who won that conference, and then the second place team in that conference was Holy Cross. Their overall record was 6-6. And then you got Bucknell in that conference; they were 6-6. And then you got Lafayette in that conference; they were 6-6. And Lehigh even shared the conference title with Holy Cross. Both of those teams finishing 5-1. But Lehigh is the only team in that conference that's over 500. Now they are 9-3 overall this year, so they're well over 500. But how good is that Patriot League conference? This is a Lafayette team that had a lead against Delaware last year. They gave up that lead and ended up losing that game in I believe that was the second round, either first or second round of the FCS Playoffs. I think it might have been the first round of the FCS Playoffs. And then you had a Holy Cross team. I can't remember if they even made the playoffs last year. I don't think Holy Cross even made the playoffs last year. But, the Patriot League is a smaller conference. They play decent football there. Do I think they could give Idaho a run for their money? Maybe. This is an Idaho offense. The only reason I say that they could potentially give Idaho a run for their money, Idaho has a good defense. They play good defensive football. They're playing at home in the Kibbe Dome, so that bodes well for them. They have a really good coach, and Coach Jason Eck. He's a great coach. He knows how to get these guys going. They've been a playoff team since he stepped foot at Idaho. But from the standpoint of, their offense, even when whatever quarterback's playing, Jack Lane, Jack Wagner, their offense is hit or miss sometimes. They got some really good receivers. Mark Hamper is their leading receiver. Freshman, should be a freshman All-American this year. Should be, I think he was an All-Conference All-Over mention this year, or maybe been All-Conference. But Mark Hamper, a really good receiver for Idaho, and then they have Jordan Dwyer, who's another good receiver, and then their running game. Nate Thomas is their leading rusher, 538 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns on 101 carries. I just don't know what to expect from this Idaho offense. I don't know what unit we're going to get. If Jack Lane is playing, I think he's the best quarterback for that unit, but also I just don't know what they're really good at. They pass the ball well enough. They have a really good receiving core of guys that make plays. But from the standpoint of, offensively, I just don't know if they're the high-flying offense that you love to see in the FCS playoffs, that you love to see in this game. I think this game could bring them some problems. It is the late night slate on ESPN. That game will be played at 7 p.m. I think it's going to be a good game. I think this might be one of the better matchups in the second round of the FCS playoffs. I'm definitely going to be watching this game. Idaho at Lehigh, both 9-3 teams coming into this FCS second round playoff matchup. I think Lehigh could give them some fits. I think Lehigh could give Idaho some fits. The defense is going to be the difference maker for me. How well does that pass rush get to the quarterback for Idaho? How well does the Idaho pass rush affect the game. Their ability to affect the quarterback of Lehigh is going to be a difference maker for them. Keyshawn James Newby, first team all-conference player this year in the Big Sky Conference. He had 9.5 sacks to finish the season. He really waned off later in the season, but he's had a really good year, and he gets off the ball. Obviously, later on in the season, he had such a great beginning of the season. Teams started a game plan against him in the second half of the season, and his ability to be able to get the quarterback or not, I think is going to be a difference in this game. I'm excited to see what Idaho is able to do. Get to see them in the playoffs. They ended up being the 8th seed. A lot of people thought they should have been the 6th seed. They were the 6th seed when they dropped the top 10 seeds, 6th or 7th seed when they dropped the top 10 seeds. They didn't lose a game following that seeded outlook, and they ended up they ended up dropping 2 seeds behind Incarnate Word and gosh, why do I keep blanking on that other team? Incarnate Word and should have it right here behind Incarnate Word and Mercer. Incarnate Word and Mercer. So we will see what Idaho is able to do. You guys let me know in the comments what you guys think about this Idaho versus Lehigh game. I think Rhode Island and Mercer is going to be a really good game. I think Tarleton State and South Dakota could be a really, really good game. And I think that Lehigh versus Idaho could be a really good game too, but I'll talk about that in a second. What do you guys think about this Lehigh versus Idaho matchup? I think it's going to come down to the offense of Idaho against the defense of Lehigh, and I think it's going to come down to the pass rush of Idaho being the difference maker in this game. You guys let me know in the comments, and I will move on. Okay, I know we just previewed some of the Big Sky matchups, but I want to give a quick preview on the top matchups in the FCS playoffs of the second round of the FCS playoffs, and give my thoughts about all of them. So first, the first game of the day at 12 p.m., the first couple games of the day, 3 games will start at 12 p.m. Mercer, Rhode Island, South Dakota State versus Montana, and Villanova Incarnate Word. Villanova Incarnate Word is going to be a good game. 10-2 Villanova, 10-3 Villanova goes into 10-3 Incarnate Word. Villanova plays good defense. Incarnate Word has a really good offense. They have the offensive player of the Southland Conference on their team, and Zach Calzada. That is going to be one of the better games in the first round of the playoffs. Villanova, how well does that defense adjust against that Incarnate Word, that high-flying Incarnate Word offense? That's going to be the matchup in that game. Montana versus South Dakota State. I just gave my thoughts about that game, so go check that out. Rhode Island versus Mercer. I think that could be a pretty good game. How good is Mercer? They won that SoCon conference outright, but what is the competition in the SoCon this year? It was a down year for the SoCon. You had Furman in that conference. They won the conference last year. They didn't play super good. UT Chattanooga didn't have a super good season this year. You also had Western Carolina, who was, I think, projected to win that conference. They didn't have a great season. So, how good is Mercer? We all know what Rhode Island brings to the table. They had a cupcake schedule in the CAA this year. They didn't play any of the tough teams besides Delaware, who's not playoff eligible, who they lost to. And, then they play a close game against a lackluster NEC Central Connecticut, who finished the season at 7-6. So I think that could be a good game. A really telling, if Mercer really wins that game outright, by 3-4 scores, I think that's telling, one, about Rhode Island, but also telling about Mercer and what type of team they'll be. They're the 7th seed, so we'll see what they're able to do. UT Martin, Montana State, gave my thoughts about that one. Abilene Christian versus North Dakota State. I think North Dakota State's probably going to win this game by 3-4 scores. They play really good defense. Abilene Christian is not going to have the offensive success that they've had throughout the season. They're also playing with the second-string quarterback. Will he still be playing in that game against North Dakota State? We will see. I don't know what happened to MacGyver, so I don't know. I can't give thoughts about why he wasn't playing yesterday and if he'll be playing this week. But I think North Dakota State should win that game very handedly against Abilene Christian. Tarleton State versus South Dakota. I think this is probably going to be the game of the day. I hope I'm not wrong about that, but I think this is probably going to be the game of the day. This is a Tarleton State team that can run the ball very successfully. A South Dakota team that is really good against the run, so strength on strength. I think it's going to come down to the South Dakota offense against the Tarleton State defense. I don't know how good that Tarleton State defense is. They just gave up 29 points against Drake, but this is probably going to be a really good game. The 3 last games of the weekend next week are going to be this week are going to be the top games. You got Tarleton State versus South Dakota. I think that could end up being a good game in Vermillion. against South Dakota. Illinois State versus UC Davis. I gave my thoughts about that game, but I think that could potentially end up being maybe a close game in Davis, California. And then you got Lehigh versus Idaho. I think that could be a good game. I have question marks about this Idaho offense. They're good. They have good players, but how good are they? How good is that Lehigh defense? They just beat Richmond. They held them to 20 points. So we will see. I think that those 3 games, Tarleton State versus South Dakota, Illinois State versus UC Davis, and Lehigh versus Idaho are my top games. Obviously, the nightcap being Lehigh versus Idaho, played in the Kibbie Dome. That's probably going to be my top game to go watch for everybody watching this. Please go watch that game. But I think Tarleton State versus South Dakota could end up being a really good game too. So that's a game that I'm going to have my eyes locked into. 9-2 South Dakota versus a 10-3 Tarleton State. Obviously, I'm going to be watching all the games, but if there's any game that I'm particularly keeping my eyes on, it's Tarleton State versus South Dakota and Lehigh versus Idaho. But you guys let me know what you guys think is your top matchup of the weekend. Rhode Island versus Mercer is another interesting one. Villanova versus Incarnate Word is another interesting one. So there's some really good matchups in the second round of the playoffs. I believe there's going to be 2 to 3 upsets. I'm going to say that out of Lehigh, Idaho, Rhode Island, Mercer, and Villanova Incarnate Word, there's going to be 2 upsets out of those 3 games. Villanova Incarnate Word. Villanova is either going to upset Incarnate Word. Rhode Island is going to upset Mercer. That's probably the least likely of all 3. Or Lehigh and Idaho. There's going to be an upset out of one of those 3 games. 2 of those 3 games. Book it. Keep it in your bookmarks. Let me know if I was right or wrong when you come back next week. But I think there's going to be some upsets this week. And I think there's going to be some good ball played. I think Illinois State, UC Davis is also a potential one. So I'm going to say 2 out of the 4 of those games, there's going to be an upset. Illinois State, UC Davis, Lehigh, Idaho, Rhode Island, Mercer, and Villanova Incarnate Word. 2 out of those 4 games are going to have an upset victory. Which one will it be? Yet to be seen, but it's going to be a good week in the FCS playoffs, second round of the FCS playoffs. You guys let me know what you guys think about these FCS second round playoff matchups upcoming, and I will move on. Okay, I want to thank you guys for tapping into the channel this week. I got a breakdown of Montana versus Tennessee State coming down the line, or actually it should have dropped yesterday, so go check out that breakdown. Montana had an up and down game, decent first half where they held the Tennessee State offense under check, but then in the second half of that game, Montana's defense was giving up some points, but Montana was really turning over the ball. The special teams unit, Junior Bergen, came up to get the victory. So go check out that breakdown. I broke it all down in my breakdown. Please go check that out. I'm hopefully going to get some more breakdowns coming up this week of the second round of the playoffs. Hopefully we get some more highlights online of some of these games. I really love to break down a lot of these FCS games and give my thoughts about some of them. But I want to thank you guys for tapping in. Make sure you guys leave me a comment. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Thank you guys so much for tapping into the channel. I appreciate all the support. Thank you guys for viewing the channel. Thank you guys so much for all that you guys do to patronize my channel and give me some views and give me some likes and give your thoughts about FCS football. It's been an amazing season, and we are just going to keep on chugging on. So it's going to be a great year. I cannot wait for what's to come in the FCS playoffs. And yeah, I appreciate you guys. I will catch you guys next week. See ya later.